Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more thrilled to welcome back internationally respected medium, mentor, and author Marilyn to Grief and Rebirth podcast. Many of you will remember our beautiful conversation about her first book titled Knowing, A Medium's Journey, and now it is my joy to introduce you to Marilyn's follow-up, Growing, A Soul's Journey. Marilyn, who is joining me from Sydney, Australia, and I think it's about 2:00 in the morning there right now, brings with her more than 2 decades of experience as a beloved spiritual mentor, evidential medium, and author whose work touches lives across the globe. Her client community spans Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Singapore, India, and the United Kingdom, and her reputation for clarity, compassion, and integrity has led her to teach in the United States alongside world-renowned mediums such as James Van Praagh, Tony Stockwell, John Holland, Jose Goschalk, a true testament to the deep respect Marilyn has earned within the spiritual community. At the heart of Marilyn's work is her devotion to evidential mediumship, relying on verifiable details from loved ones in spirit to bring comfort, healing, and connection to those still here. Her deep interest in mindfulness and philosophy infuses her readings, classes, and group work with a grounded, soulful presence. Marilyn brings a gentle wisdom that helps people understand the omnipresence of spirit and the enduring truth that love never dies. She is also a gifted teacher, leading development programs such as Allow Me to Be Your Personal Guide and a beginner's guide to spiritual development, along with a wide range of workshops for those seeking to deepen their spiritual abilities. And her work has been featured on television and in major publications, further establishing Marilyn as a respected and far-reaching voice in spiritual education. I'm looking forward to talking with Marilyn about living from the soul and not the ego. What exactly are soulmates? Why our growth is a gift to everyone. The healing effects of meditation. And, as recounted in her new book, Growing, A Soul's Journey, some of the numerous personal experiences she has had with the spirit world and the deep wisdom and practical insight she has gained from these incredible encounters, and more. Marilyn's greatest joy is witnessing the healing that unfolds when people receive evidential messages from their loved ones. Those moments when hope is rekindled, understanding deepens, and a new chapter of healing begins. This will surely be a deeply enlightening and very interesting interview filled with inspiring, uplifting insights. Hi there, and welcome to the International Award-winning Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author, and trauma survivor, Irene Weinberg, here to support you wherever you are on your healing journey. Each week, I connect with leading grief and trauma experts, intuitive healers, mediums, and inspiring voices who share powerful stories of loss, resilience, and transformation. If you're searching for hope, meaning, and a path forward after loss or trauma, you're in the right place. Together, let's rediscover joy, healing, and the possibility of rebirth. Okay, Marilyn, I'm finally here for you. Welcome back, my friend, to Grief and Rebirth
Oh,
podcast.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Gosh, what an introduction. Yeah, and yours would be equally 5 times as long with all the work that you do. Gosh, I can't think how long it is since we last caught up.
I
And
think it's about 2, 3 years. And when I
yeah,
found out you were coming out with a new book, I said to you, Marilyn, come on, let's to let everybody know about your new book.
yeah, yeah. Well, the new book, you've written a couple, and gosh, you think you're going to write it in a few hours, and some 10 years later, it's complete.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Did it
Throughout,
take you 10 years to finish this book that we're talking about today?
yeah, pretty much. I think after I wrote my first book, I had people email me and say they read it in a few hours. And I sat at the computer and I said to Spirit, gee, it'd be really nice to be able to put a book together in 3 hours. Yeah, I started. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably, one line or one paragraph. And you know what it's like. It gets shelved for a year
Yeah.
and yeah, life gets
Yeah.
in the way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's life.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's start from the beginning because we talked about this in our first interview, but let's remind everyone what inspired you to become a spiritual mentor and an evidential medium. I know you've shared that there came a moment when you realized you weren't living the life you came here to live, when you simply woke up one day and followed that unmistakable pull from within. Could you tell us about your awakening?
Gosh, it's really hard to put into words, hearing you talk about that day that I woke up, realizing I wasn't living the life that I'd come here to live. Yeah, there was materialistically like I had everything, but there was that emptiness. Yeah, the soul.
Weren't you
That
working at a little bookshop or something? Am I remembering that
That
correctly?
was when the seeking and searching started. Yeah, that was after the wake up of realizing I wasn't living the life that I came here to live. Yeah, it
Wow.
was. Yeah, just there was so many. Look, there was a lot of loves. Don't get me wrong, along the way. And as I look back and recounter, none of that was wasted to bring me to where I am today. That was all part of igniting the soul, to have to wake up. Every piece that I learned along the way, every hurt, every pain, every experience, it was part of it all. Same when I teach people, I spend time with people, I know that they've done a lifetime of work to get to me, for their soul to be ignited, to find me, to find my soul, and for our souls to be aligned.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
So you come, so this, you just had this realization, then other things followed and started putting you on the path, right? So let's talk about your new book, Growing a Soul's Journey, because in it you share some of these extraordinary personal experiences you've had with the spiritual world, encounters filled with deep wisdom, practical insight, and profound soul level guidance. To be honest, from a personal point of view, I love the part about the soul level guidance. I think it's fabulous. Would you share some of those powerful experiences with us? And is there anything you'd like our audience to know about your new book? Is there anything, more?
Just read it.
Okay.
Read it. Yeah, keep life simple. Read it. Look, there's a lot of things. A couple come to mind. Always been inspired by the other world. Often going for a walk and just sitting in a park and gazing out into the distance and being inspired. Always inspiration being imparted from their world to, my world here. The big one in the book was going into the spirit world and the sleep state. Yeah, really wanting to know what it was like in the other world, and asking that question. I asked that question before I went to sleep, that I wanted to come into the spirit world. I wanted to go into the afterlife. I wanted to know more about what it was like. And I had a profound experience, Irene. I could cry thinking about it, just the emotion and the love, because it's indescribable. It's hard to put into words, you know.
Were you sleeping? Were you
Yeah,
sleeping?
I was sleeping. I
And
was
what did you
sleeping.
see? What
I
was this dream that you never forgot?
Well, I drifted off to sleep, and like so many people have shared, you know, there was that moment of experiencing just many, many hands that I was aware of as I traveled towards the light in the dream state. And, you know, waking up the next day and trying to recall it and write about it, I spent about 3 days sitting at my computer, and it was almost like I was encased in this bubble, this transparent bubble of all the colours of the rainbow. You couldn't burst that bubble.
Wow.
For about 3 days, I was in this state of euphoricness. And I'm sitting at my computer and I'm trying to write, you know, what I experienced, what I could recall. And I remember being a silhouette standing in the light. But for the life of me, you know, trying to understand that, you know, some 10 or 15 years ago when I think back, to me, it was a silhouette and a light. You know, I wrote about it in my book about the beauty being indescribable. And I love mosaic vases, mosaic tables. And, you know, it was almost like in that silhouette, you know, I was a million broken pieces, but I was whole, perfect, beautiful, with all the cracks, all the flaws, everything, you know, trying to write about it. And you know what, Irene, it wasn't until November last year I put the book out. It wasn't long before that I couldn't quite get that chapter right. I'd been trying to write it, I'd been editing it, I'd been going over it, and something wasn't right. And I spent 10 years putting the second book together, you know, in a blink of an eye. That's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
But, you know, it takes a while to have
With a lot of
experience.
different a lot of editing and right, I know. And reworking.
Yeah, it's endless. But, you know, right at the 11th hour, I realised that the silhouette standing in the light was the soul body. And that's how the soul body presents in the afterlife. You know, if we're looking at it, you know, trying to understand it or interpret it, you know, with the human eye.
So, so what you didn't see, you did not see the body.
It was just a total silhouette. Well, there was a silhouette,
So
it was like a solid body, like a solid body, you know. But I described it as a silhouette standing in the light. Yeah, but that light was indescribable. You know, I'm sure like you and everybody listening, you know, we wonder, what is it like in the afterlife? You know, we all know that the soul is eternal, you know, through the communications between both worlds. Come on, we all know that. You know, we know that it happens. But me, just like the next person, you know, I've always wondered, you know, how do they present in the other world? You know, they're not walking around with their shoes and socks on. And, you know, I know they can impress upon us, you know, through the mind-to-mind connection, that. But come on, I've dissected it. I've turned it inside out, just like the next person. I wake up every day wondering. You know, I look up at the stars of a night and I say to Spirit, are the stars all the souls that have passed to the other world? You know, what is it like there? Yeah. But it wasn't until the 11th hour that I'd written about this experience that it came to me that that's the soul body in the other world. That's how it presents to the human eye. Yeah, like a silhouette. Yeah. Anyway,
I've also heard interesting. I've also heard that people say that when they cross over, they sort of get a hologram of all the personas that they have had through time, and they can present any part of themselves that they want you to see as a medium to communicate to the deceased loved one in this lifetime that's there. Would you say that's correct?
That's a great word, you know. It's interesting the different words we understand, you know, here on the earth. Hologram, yes, I have to spend some time with that one after today. But yeah, absolutely. That's a great word. Look, mentalist, medium is mental, mind to mind. Okay, so the strength of our mind, of communicating with those in the other world and their ability through that connection to impress images upon us. Yeah, it's unbelievable, really, and it is a
Amazing.
miracle. A miracle's the best word, I really think. After all my years of communicating with those in the other world, you know, knowing every day it's a miracle.
It's amazing. What is your
Yeah,
guidance about growing and following the soul's journey, Marilyn? You've said that, you know, it's about following the heart to lead. Okay, you were given guidance and you were starting to follow your heart to lead, even when you can't see what's ahead, and trusting that silent language that we have within us. Um, how do we learn to walk with that energy? And what about people who are not yet? I guess that's where meditation may come in, but how do people who cannot yet tune in to the guidance that is out there waiting for them to be able to receive it?
be in that place. Yeah, you and I were talking before we came on live about living outside the box. Yeah, and that's probably a really good analogy. You know, I think all your listeners will probably relate to that. You know, we do live within a box. You know, there's fear, there's conditioning, there's patterns, there's beliefs. You know, if I just think for a moment about how our whole life, Irene, we're told, wait till you retire and travel the world, you know. I'm so pleased that I didn't follow that one because so many people I know don't get there. You know, retirement comes, they can't walk or they've gone to the other world. So, yeah, you know, thinking for a moment about all those desires, those wishes, those wants, and give them to yourself. Yeah,
And
yeah,
give
from the
them to
soul.
your soul. So, like, give me an example of like a pattern or a want that you would give to your soul.
Oh, pattern or a want, hand it over. Oh gosh, that's a big one. Um,
Is there a pattern or a want that you had that you gave it over to your soul and you began it to receive?
well, I guess fear is the biggest word that comes to mind. You know, the fear of the unknown. Whereas the unknown's a beautiful place to be. Because in the unknown, there is a knowing. And I talked about that in my first book. And, you know, having that awareness to, you know, to do something that you want to do or something that you know, I mean, come on, will I jump out of an aeroplane? Well, you know, maybe I would because, you know, here I am sitting talking to you about, you know, what would I break free from? What limiting belief? Yeah. And you know, you talked about not fearing death. So, you know, what would stop me from jumping? That's the vision I had while I'm talking to you. What would stop me from jumping out of a plane? And what would the fear be? Yeah, so, you know, to get out of the way of all of that, that belief that, hey, you know, the parachute's not going to open, you know, I'm going to break a bone or I'm not going to touch the ground. Because those things that we tell ourselves, they're bigger than the
We give
experience.
ourselves self limitations. We hold
Yeah.
ourselves back in a lot of ways, right?
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely, yeah, and it comes back to learned behaviour, I guess, what we're taught when we're so young. Yeah, our conditioning.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're
so it's
given these scripts and they don't necessarily apply to our
yeah, so
lives.
yeah, probably to answer your question, try something that you haven't tried. Yeah, and then
Well,
you
I
talked
always say you
about
can always walk into a door, through a door, and try something that you haven't tried. And if you don't like it, give yourself permission to walk out back out the door. But at least you tried. At
yeah,
least you opened,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, and you asked about meditation. Well, meditation is a doorway to so many worlds. Yeah, joy, happiness, breaking free of those limits.
So, how do you deal with someone who says, Marilyn, I can't meditate? I close my eyes and all I hear is my own thoughts over and over and over again. And in this thing, I don't see anything. I don't get a message, nothing. I spend 15 minutes with my eyes closed and nothing happens. What do you say?
Well, you gave yourself that 15 minutes of sitting and being aware of the thoughts and being aware that nothing happened. Yeah, because, awareness, meditation, people always think that they've got to get rid of the thoughts, that there's got to be that silence. Look, meditation is a jumble of a lot of things. You start to feel pain in the body, the mind travels. But just having that awareness to realize, that we go to all those different places while we're sitting, the physical body, the thoughts, all of that, and then just come back to the breath. But that's a big doorway meditation. You talk about walking through a doorway and trying something new, it's had a profound experience on my life. But meditation, it's not natural for me either to sit still. In my early days, I would try 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Gee, now you're lucky if I sit for a minute or 2 minutes. But, people come to me, clients, and they say, I wish my husband would, meditate. But then then I find out he loves to go fishing, and he throws a rod and he stands there, holding a rod for, an hour, waiting for that fish to bite, and he's in a meditative place. He's in his happy place. Yeah. And then there's walking, going for a mindful walk, being aware of your surroundings and really tuning into, the sounds, the birds. So, yeah, meditation doesn't really have to be about sitting, in the quiet. Thich Nhat Hanh, I've probably said his name incorrectly, the Buddhist monk, I loved his teachings. And, he opened a village, Plume Village, I think it is, and he does mindful walking, mindful eating.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. So, meditation, there's many different ways. And again, we label things, we put conditions, we put perimeters around a word. Yeah. But, meditation can be putting your feet up, watching a movie.
And suddenly something comes to you. When I often get messages, I'm in the shower. My brain is disconnected. I'm surrounded by water, and all of a sudden a thought will come into my mind.
Look, inspiration comes when you least expect it. And for me, walking, I talked about it in growing, having an epiphany and walking with my guide. I'd probably spent 10 years trying to figure out what was his name, and I'd ask. Nothing, nothing. People think because I'm a medium, that it happens in an instinct. And, the day that I least expected it, just out walking, had been talking about wanting to know who my guide's name was, more about the life that he lived in the earthly world, just randomly, Irene, out of the blue, took my arm while I was out walking. And it was amazing, and just shared his life with me. Has it happened again?
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's when we least expected.
That's amazing.
And it's like you say, when we're in the shower, it's like when we're doing, we're focusing on the body. We're in that place of, that moment of, we are focused on one thing, maybe washing the body or washing the hair. And that's when the inspirations and the epiphanies come. Freeway, driving on a freeway, you're watching that white line, the car in front of you. Oh, my dad came to me and communicated with me in the car. Again, when you least expect it.
That's fabulous. What would you say the healing effects of meditation are? I mean, like we're walking, we're doing different things. Does it?
Life-changing. Life-changing.
In what way?
Oh, I think they have a profound effect on the body, the nervous system over time. The healing that occurs for us through realizations, through inspiration. Life changing. I think it makes us a kinder person. I think it allows us, that space to be at peace in chaos or catastrophe. Yeah, through, going to that quiet place. I think, we can hold a space for those that are suffering more so. when we've spent time, in meditation, turning our attention within, soul searching, soul seeking.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's another part you talk about in the book, which is about embracing impermanence, and I would imagine that goes along with what you're talking about now, because meditation can help you with settle you down for that difficult piece, right?
Yeah, yeah. How do you find peace when you're laying there knowing that, you're going to take your last breath? Yeah, well, knowing that, on some level life is eternal, that the soul lives on.
But
Those
everything's
memories.
very impermanent while we're here on the planet. I mean, things are
Yeah,
constantly changing, right? So
yeah,
it helps you
absolutely.
to accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. Every day, every breath, my interpretations, my thoughts about the soul, the work that I do, the life that we've come to live, everything just constantly changing for me, evolving as well. Everything I thought was that isn't that today. You know what I mean? Yeah, just expanding on all of what we've, coming back to what we've been taught, knowing that there is so much more. Look, I look out into space some days and I think about that space that's in front of me and how limitless it is and what else is there amongst it all that I have no knowing of.
It's
I wonder if
very
other people are the same.
it's
Yeah.
very amazing, right? When you finally
Yeah.
realize that. And I have another question for you. You talk about that isolation on a spiritual journey as a bridge, not a destination. Would that be part of that meditation thing? Because when you meditate or you're taking that walk, you're kind of inside yourself and isolating
You
you
know,
from.
you know you're not alone, Irene. You know you're not alone. You're fulfilling a soul purpose. When you're living from the soul, you're not going to the other world, so to speak. Mavis Patil used to say, with an empty suitcase. you know you're following a soul purpose. You talk about leaving something behind. When you turn your attention within, you don't walk alone. You're not seeking that praise from the outside world. You're not needing to fill up your every moment, with the chatter or having to do. You're happy just doing nothing.
Grateful.
But in doing nothing, there's so much that has been done. Yeah, and living with gratitude and giving thanks for every moment. Yeah.
Marilyn, can you talk to us about? I know this is a pet subject of yours, and actually, I really resonate with this also. How do we learn to trust that spirit that's within us and live from the soul rather than the ego? Because I would say in this world, most people are living from their egos. And to change your viewpoint that you have a soul and you're living from your soul wisdom instead of that ego push. Could you explain that more and tell people what that looks like? Because you and I are two people who are living more from our soul. Or many, I mean, it's not that I don't have ego at all, but I'm more aware of it and conscious of it now. Can you talk about that to people?
Gosh, things come to mind when you ask questions, Irene. And I think, on a human level, we go through a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And it's not that you can totally wipe that out of your life path. But I think if you are living from a soul purpose and you understand, one word that comes to mind is, how expectations in the earthly world bring disappointment. I mean, why do we need to live with expectations? So if we're living in a space of no expectation, but on some level we know we're being guided, we feel very fulfilled. So there's a lot of teachings and there's a lot of learnings along the way, and there's a lot of life experiences. Gosh, how many hurts and pain does somebody want to go through as a human in the earthly world before they wake up and realize from a soul purpose that there's an offering, presence, that can be offered from the space that we reside in with being with others. And that can pierce hearts, that that love, that presence. Yeah, whether that makes sense, it is. I think as a human, how much hurt and pain do you want to go through? How much suffering do you want to go through on the earth before you wake up and you realize that there's other ways to live. And it's not to say that, people like you and I don't suffer. We probably suffer less.
We've suffered a lot to get to where we are, but we've grown and healed from it, right?
Absolutely. But when you hear, stories, when you hear about what other people have endured and they're telling their story and they're out there, supporting others through their grief, do you think your grief, your pain hasn't even touched the surface of what other people? I like you hear stories and I think, gosh, how do you get out of bed every day?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And then if you live, once you understand this and you're living from a higher view, I really think that it's very comforting. And the other thing I want to ask you about is I think part of the ego is that people, it's an illusion. I think they have control over everything. And that's a distortion, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Well, come on. I think the one thing that comes to mind is, recently I took a tumble and broke a bone in my wrist. And
sorry to hear that.
Oh, that's okay. It's pretty, it doesn't really register on the Richter scale compared to other life experiences that people share. But you know what? It's the first time it happened to me. I've got to this part of my life, never broken a bone. I've been very, very lucky health-wise. And I had just finished growing A Soul's Journey. And I knew that I was to slow down. I knew the message was to slow down. Yeah, and I was out there. I was out there rushing in the earthly world. I had no reason to rush. I had no reason to hurry. There was a million reasons that I could have, changed that moment if I had stopped rushing. Yeah, and my plan after the book came out, if there is a plan, so to speak, was to slow down. Well, I got slowed down. I took a tumble.
Yeah, it slows you down. Spirit made sure that you we're going to slow down.
Broke a bone, thought I didn't need to have surgery. A few weeks later, ended up having surgery. And yeah, what a journey that was.
Wow.
Yeah, being forced to be still. So again, those moments when we think we're in control and just the rug gets pulled from under us and, you and I smile and we are reminded, that we are not in control.
Absolutely. I mean, there are things that happen in my life and I'll say, Irene, you're not in control over here. I mean, like, how are you going to be flexible and adjust to what's going on?
Yeah, it's like I don't have time for this, but what do we learn? We think we've learned about patience. You talk about the ego and the human and all of that, but yeah, learning it on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Revisit it all. Yeah.
And now I want to talk about another question, popular question from your book. What's the deal with soulmates? Why are they sometimes understood as soul groups, families, or teams connected by an invisible thread? And are we all meant to meet a true soulmate? Or has the other side engineered that? I mean, you make a life plan. You tell your soulmate or whatever you're going to come in for this and that. How does that all get put together over there? And are there different types? It's not just a love soulmate, right? There are different types of soulmates.
There's so many. I did write a little bit about this because there seems to be a bit of a misconception. Well, from where I'm sitting anyway, a lot of people think we have one soulmate, the love of the life, but I tend to disagree. Yeah, I tend to disagree. I think, soulmates can be friends, like you say, we can have groups of friends where we connect on a soul level. I feel that it's orchestrated as well from those in the other world. Absolutely. Those in the other world are continually, connecting us with like-minded people in this world. Come on, how did you and I meet, Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah, who brought us together? You know, I read for people and I get to see my mum up there sitting with somebody's mum who's come to have a reading with me, you know, that I've never met, you know, and they had similar interests in the earthly world and they show it to me from up there, you know, and they've brought us all together. You know, mediumship doesn't always work for everybody. You know, we talk about maybe it's not quite the right medium to have the reading with if you feel that the session wasn't really what you wanted. You know, there's so much around soul to soul connections. You know, people talk about living a life before in another lifetime with someone and then coming back and connecting with them again. You know, revisiting, relearning. The mind boggles, Irene. But I do feel there's misconception around a soulmate being the love of your life. You know, that could be a friend. You know, you could have a friend in the earthly world that there's a great love of. I'm not talking about on a romantic level. Yeah. But I mean, what about you? I really feel we can have more than one soulmate.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Like
A
in a
romantic
way,
level.
what's coming to my mind, I mean, my soulmate, and I've been told many times, my romantic soulmate was my husband who passed in the car accident next to me. But when I was first coming out into the world with my first job, I ended up working. I was a buyer for Macy's for a while, and I was in the buying line and all of that kind of thing. And my boss was, we were so unbelievably compatible. We grew so much from knowing each other. Now, I would not, he was in no way a love soulmate, but on many levels, I feel like he was sent to me to ease my journey into the world and into my life and all of that. And because I had this, I mean, we were just so compatible. We did so well for business and all of that together and all. And then when the time came to an end for that phase of my life, it made it easier for me to segue to when I found my true soulmate, my romantic soulmate. I already had established this emotional intimacy with this other fellow, which made it easier for me to transition for the needs of the new relationship. So I do think we have different types of soulmates in our lives.
Yeah, to develop, to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've sat in the quiet of, traveled the world and done silent retreats, and I've met people that just emanate this presence of just love. And I've thought that on a romantic level, they're my soulmate and I've fallen in love. But it's never been anything other than the love of their energy, their presence, their knowledge. And to develop, your own self, your own knowledge, your own wisdom through the connection with that person, but not on a romantic or a physical, far beyond that. Yeah.
It's sort of like I felt like it was more of a heart connection. And then I think certain friendships come into your life. There's a favorite expression I have: reason, season, lifetime. And sometimes that other soulmate like this other fellow came in for that reason. And then later on, our relationship kind of drifted into other places. And so I think that it is planned, and people come in and out of our lives to help us. It's just that, are you listening? Are you open?
Yeah.
Are you working with it?
Absolutely. And that's how we grow. That's how we grow, by allowing ourselves to connect, with somebody, that we may have just met. And it's like, why have you turned up in my life today? Why? And again, to think outside the box, to learn from another soul's perspective. Yeah, rather than staying. I mean, I don't know, do all people in the earthly world just stay in the same circle of friends and groups? I guess some people do. But then when I think about it, we're always meeting other people.
True.
We are. We're drawn to, other people's presence, other people's energy. And that's when we talk about, the soul to soul connection. There's that familiarity when we meet someone, and it's like, The soul recognizes either, we've had a lifetime together before, or we have similar understandings. We live in similar worlds. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. But it's
amazing.
funny, humans, how we put labels on things and we make things just one thing. They're
Well, that's
limitless.
because that's inside the box. I think when
Yeah.
you're outside the box, you kind of get rid of a lot of those labels, right? And
Yeah.
I need to say to people that if you start to leave the box and you start to open to this wider way of viewing life, you will make some of the people in your life very uncomfortable. But that may be what is meant to be. Like you're kind of growing and moving on. And you say that our growth is a gift to everyone because we're truly one. Can you explain that more? Because it's sort of part of that, right?
Well, you talking about leaving the box, when I think about that change in my life, you lose your family, you lose your friends, but do we ever lose anything? You know what I mean? We are always connected. I can talk about being separate from family members for years, but you know what? I could walk down a street and pass them, or I could drive around a roundabout and pass them. And in that instinct, of not having them in my life or not communicating with them in that moment, something ignites in my body to turn and look, and I can see them. So, we're always connected. Those bonds of love never die, even if human wise, we are separated physically. Yeah, if that makes sense. And even when I talk about, and you talk about how, we can lose our friends and our family when we step outside the box. But I think, again, we're lucky enough to see, full circle, things change. Other people in our lives, they either have a wake up or they've experienced more, or, they come back around. Yeah, life is really like a circle, isn't it?
It certainly is. It
Yeah.
certainly is. I know you've got some programs, Marilyn. You've got something called Allow Me to Be Your Personal Guide, a beginner's guide to spiritual development, and you've got workshops. Do you want to tell people about them? How would they? I mean, you're in Australia, but how would they tune in, or does it get recorded, or what do you do? And do you have a special offer for our audience today?
Look, most of my work is one on one. I do retreats, I do group calls. I love the intimacy of, 10 people, 20 people. You do get to see, life change for those people in 3 days or 5 days or a
Wow, what
month
an
or 12
experience.
months. You do, and that's not to say, maybe you don't get to see it in a room with 500 people or 1,000 people, but yeah, we've all got a different purpose. And I love the intimacy of teaching and being amongst, a small group of people. Allow me to be your personal guide. It's very much a mindfulness journey, really helping people to be present, to live in the moment. A beginner's guide to spiritual development, very much for people to understand, dreams, visitation, symbols, all of those things. And I teach other people that have an interest in communicating with those in the other world over 12 months, 3 months. Yeah, all sorts of things. What can I offer people? Golly, do you do a draw, Irene? Do you get people to email you and want to go into a draw to win one of the courses? I'd be happy to do
That'd
that.
be marvelous. Let's do it through the show notes. So
Yeah,
you can let my office know, and we will absolutely put the details in the show notes for people.
yeah.
And
Someone
what
can
an opportunity for someone to come into one of your programs.
do one of the programs with me one on one. It would be my pleasure.
That'd be marvelous. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank
Yeah.
you so
Well,
much.
you and I know it will be life changing.
Absolutely, and that's what we're all about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
and then they can share their heart with the world, Irene.
maybe we convert a few people, and then they start to. It's the power of the collective. Then they start to help other people. That's how it's happened for us, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was such a skeptic, and now look. So it helped me
Yeah.
so many people. So Marilyn, I'm coming down to the importance of healing. Why should people go out of their way to go through all this pain to heal all this stuff that's happened to them, and pull themselves out of their swamp of suffering? Is it worth it? What is the importance of healing in this
Wow.
lifetime and not pushing it over to
Absolutely,
next time?
absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. Gosh, finding, a sentence or words, the meaning of life. What do we come here for? To learn about kindness. So, through all the hurt and the pain and the healing, if you can get to that place of kindness, being a kinder person, having a deeper understanding, not being judgmental, healing rifts, amongst family, for those that we leave behind, not to have to deal with so much grief, to have a better understanding of things that happen in life, just simplicity. When you and I think about, the people that come to us and there's been rifts and they haven't been healed, and people live with that grief. They live with that blame.
And the issues keep coming up and up and up and up and up all the time,
Yeah.
right? Would you say? I liken it to people have, we all have these backpacks full of our negative experiences and the things that have happened and the people who have hurt us and all the betrayals and all that. That's all in that backpack. And we carry it with us everywhere we go. And then when you heal and you're starting to heal that, all of a sudden this resentment drops out of the backpack. This problem kind of drops out of the backpack. And now you're becoming much lighter. You can actually, I think, enjoy life more in the present moment.
And it's not to take away someone's pain or someone's hurt or someone's experience. We all get stuck in different,
Mm-hmm.
holes, different scenarios for, longer times, shorter times than others. But yeah, by sitting in the quiet, turning your attention within, just allowing yourself that time for the healing to occur. That touches other people when you're in their space. I like one of the sayings that Buddha talks about. People talk about letting go, and I sort of say to people, well, in letting go, we've got to do something. That can be hard. Buddha talks about when we have the awareness of seeing something, resentment or pain or judgment, when we see it, just see it. We don't have to do anything with it. You and I can have a moment where we can see, judgment, resentment, and once we see it, it's brought to light. But we don't have to get caught up in it or
Right.
beat up on ourselves or give ourselves a hard time.
Right.
Just be aware that, hey, maybe next time I'll do something a bit different to this way, or I don't want to live in that world. Yeah, we have a choice of
Or I'll make
what
different choices. Exactly. I can make, and I don't have to listen to those other voices. I can make a new choice that's right for me, right? So for those people who are grieving or attempting to rebuild their lives, is it still possible for them to experience joy?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen people, suffering the loss of a loved one. The communication between the worlds, sometimes I wake up and think what I'm doing is just not enough, Irene. I think, why am I doing this? What am I giving? But you see that spark of light that's ignited through the communication, with someone who's come to you that's in that deep level of grief. And there is healing that happens in their life from them, just being aware or reliving memories or being with a stranger, being able to communicate a memory or, maybe the person who's come to us for a session is having their own experience, because a lot of people that lose loved ones or majority of people, they either have a visitation or they walk through their house and, they're aware of a presence. Yeah, so, through levels of grief, you offering what you're offering, all the people that you communicate that people can listen into, knowing that there is something more to life, than what we think. But yeah, I absolutely know that people can rebuild and find joy again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would like to add something to that. When I had this accident, my husband died next to me, and they pulled me out of the car, and all of these things happened to me. One of the things I thought about as they were pulling me out of my car, and I got the spiritual message and all, but on the earthbound plane, I said to myself, I will figure out how to get through this, because I have to show my son you can get hit by a grenade in life and still keep going. So right away, I scripted myself that I was going to heal, or I was going to do whatever I needed to do to get through it. And so in addition to all the spiritual things that happened to me, I was going to therapy, I was working with an energy healer, and all these things that I was doing. And my son and I have met a lot of people who feel that if you're really grieving and in the depths of grief, you can never have joy again. And I will never forget when my son said to me about 4 years after the accident, my husband was buried on his 21st birthday. And my son said to me, Mom, there's been nothing worse than watching you in total despair, and nothing better than to see you be able to have joy again. And that's so important that I showed him that even though I was in the depths of everything, that I could still be happy for him with other things going on in his life. There were still things that were going on that did not, that brought me joy, and I let it in. I did not have to push it away because I was grieving.
Yeah. It's beautiful how you talk about in the human world, our loved ones don't like to see us grieving, because that's a very big message from the other world as well. Those in the other world, we think because the body's gone, that they're not aware of our everyday life and the things that are happening in our everyday life. And they don't like to see us sad from their world either, Irene. So it's beautiful to hear you, share that, because it's not something I've really thought about a lot, just until you spoke about it, how those in the earthly world don't like to see us grieving or sad. There's so much that's not spoken in the earthly world, which is sad.
Which is really sad.
Even your passing, or the ceremony of your passing, people don't talk about death, or when my mum died, we got to talk about that, and it was a profound thing for me to be able to share with my family, to know that my mum was going to die and her time was limited. And we went and picked the coffin with my mum. One of my brothers was mortified. My mum was okay with it, and then at my mum's day of passing, to honour her wishes that she'd shared with us, that was life changing.
Beautiful. I think it's so beautiful.
That was life changing. That changed the whole way the day was dealt with. We were honouring my mum's wishes. There wasn't a heaviness. I'm not saying there wasn't tears, there wasn't grief, but in knowing what my mum wanted on that day, there was a big weight lifted. And I just wish more and more people got to talk about that day.
And that fear of talking about this. But, I think it's easier to talk about this subject, Marilyn, if you know that you're going to live past the death of your physical body. I think that removes a lot of the fear and enables you to discuss it. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. But you know what? It's not going to stop me from throwing it out there in a conversation, because it's an important one. And you and I know it's life changing. If we talked about planning that day, you've got some beautiful roses in the background. Well,
Thank
gosh,
you.
My heart would be ignited and joyful, if there were roses on my day of passing. And I think if my family knew that and they ran around picking them and getting them, how beautiful a moment that would be for them to honour something they knew was going to make me happy. Yeah. It
That's
puts it all
beautiful.
into a different perspective.
Totally. So, as we're talking about how it's putting it into perspective, I want to close this very special interview with you, Marilyn. It's so nice to be with you again. With you have such a wise and enlightening quote from your book, Growing a Soul's Journey. Quote, everyone we meet is carrying burdens of some kind that they want so much to be free of. Painful childhoods, loss and grief, illness, financial worry, physical or mental pain, lack of opportunities. We cannot begin to name them all, and everyone is in need of forgiveness for something they've done or left undone. We're all alike in this way. For this reason, I say to you what I say to myself. Live a full life and try not to let the trials of life harden your heart. Soften to life's learnings and offer an open heart and hand to all, remembering that the first step to making this difference is to release the things that do not serve you. Marilyn, thank you once again from my heart for this truly unforgettable, moving conversation filled with its positive and very enlightening insights. I wish you from my heart abundant blessings always.
Thank you. Thank you. Gosh, just to add to that, listening to you talk about all of those things, it feels like you're in the room with me. We're in different countries. So, there, thank you. I can feel your presence, sense your presence, and we could chat forever.
Yes, we could. And go out for dinner.
Yeah, well, let's make it happen in the
Okay.
human world. Vulnerability came to me, the word, when you were saying and talking about all of those things, and we talk about the ego and in times of judgment and all of those things. But yeah, if we could just put the ego aside, if we could just fall apart, fall into a heap and be vulnerable and see the magic happen from that place of sharing.
Yeah. Oh,
How,
my goodness.
yeah, how beautiful a life.
It would be a different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you once again.
Oh, my pleasure. So my pleasure. I'm sending you heart hugs and kisses through the Zoom. And as I always like to say, Marilyn, and I'm sure where you and I are concerned, to be continued.
Yes, absolutely. God bless.
Continued. God bless.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at griefandrebirth.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel at Healing from Grief and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to www.amazon.com/shop/Irene S. Weinberg to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon.